Okay, if you weren't here last Sunday, we started a series called Faith and Reason. We're reminding ourselves that Christianity is logical. Christianity is not something you have to accept by blind faith. There is very solid rationale and reasons for our faith. Now, if you didn't hear last Sunday's sermon, I'll remind you they're available for you online. I would encourage you to go back and watch and catch up with the rest of the family because today we're moving on. Today I want to talk to you about creation. How the world in which we live proves that there is a God. Now, as you know, people line up on both sides of this issue. Creationism on one hand, evolution on the other hand. You are all very familiar with that. And sometimes people line up very passionately on one side or the other. A little girl came home from science class one day. She's all confused. Got her dad along and said, "Daddy, I'm all confused from science class. Can you tell me where human beings came from? How did we get here in the first place?" So her dad, trying to be helpful, said, "Well, sweetheart, a long time ago, human beings were monkeys. And over time, monkeys became human beings." Well, that just didn't make any sense to her. So she's still confused. Later that evening, she happened to get her mother by herself and said, "Mom, can you help me understand where human beings came from? Because I'm all confused." So her mother said, "Well, sure, sweetheart. God created mankind. He created Adam and Eve, and that's where we come from." Well, the little girl was so relieved. She said, "Mom, I'm just telling you, that is such a relief because Daddy said we came from monkeys." And the mother responded, "Oh, sweetheart, he was talking about his side of the family." See, even people have different ideas. People line up on both sides of this issue. But here's the unfortunate thing. It's tragic. When people line up on the creation or evolution side, they think they have been led to believe they're lining up on the side of science or the side of religion. In other words, thinking people who rely on science are evolutionists, while believing people who rely on religion are creationists. Church, listen very closely to what I'm about to say, and I'm about to attempt to show you for the rest of the sermon. The creation-evolution debate is not about religion versus science. It is about good science versus bad science. And good science is on Christianity's side. Science supports the creation event. So what we're going to talk about this morning is why that is. Now, before I get there, I'd like to remind all of us why this matters. What does it matter how we got here? What if we were created, if we evolved, does it really matter? Is it really worth worrying about? I would like to point your attention to Romans chapter 1. That's our sermon text for the day. Romans chapter 1, I want to read to you 3 verses that Paul wrote to the Christians in Rome regarding this issue. Let's all stand together as we honor the reading of God's word from Romans chapter 1, beginning with verse 18. Paul writes this: the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and his divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. You may be seated. I would like to suggest at the beginning, and then I would like to return to this later, I would like to suggest at the beginning that the reason evolutionists resist the creation theory so vehemently is because if there is a creator, then the implications are enormous. Let me say it this way. If creation is true, then there is in fact a supreme being to whom we are all accountable. If the world was created by a supernatural, intelligent being, that means that we all are accountable to that being. And we must pay attention. It has to affect the way that we live our lives. So here's what I'd like to just share with you in the limited time that I have. I'd like to clarify how the creation of the world points toward a creator. And I'll promise you this up front. We're going to rely on good science. I'm not even going to read anything else out of the Bible this morning. I just want to rely on good science to show you that the creationism is in fact the most logical scientific explanation for how the world exists. First of all, I'd like to start at the beginning because in fact, there was a beginning, okay? The universe had a beginning. We know this to be true. Now, this turns out to be a very big deal because up until the early 20th century, Darwinists and evolutionists, atheists, took comfort in believing that the universe was eternal. In other words, they took comfort in believing that the universe never had a beginning. It has always been. Now, why was that so comforting to them? Very simple. Because things that begin must have a cause, okay? And in an attempt to eliminate any need for a cause, atheists claimed that the universe never had a beginning. Now, this is called in science the law of causality, this idea that things that begin must be caused. Every effect must have a cause. Things don't happen for just no reason. Perhaps many of us have wished at times in our life this was not true. Remember when you were, I'll just make this general. Remember when you were a little kid and you and your friends are playing in the living room, throwing a ball around, and all of a sudden, you knock over the vase crashes to the floor, and mom comes running in, and she asks the question, who broke the vase? In moments like that, don't you wish it was okay to say nobody? Nobody broke the vase. No, that is not a proper response because things do not happen for no reason. In fact, the law of causality is foundational to science. Science can be described as a search for causes. Based on what we observe to have taken place, what were the causes of what we now observe? That is science. So in an attempt to sidestep the need for a causer of the universe, atheists just claimed that the universe never had a beginning, therefore needed no cause. But in the 1920s, science dealt several serious blows to that way of thinking. I want to share with you two. There are many. I want to share with you two. First of all, we know the universe had a beginning because the universe is expanding. Okay, in other words, the pieces of the universe are getting further and further away from each other. The universe is expanding. In 1927, Edwin Hubble discovered this. Here's what he noticed. He noticed that light coming from distant galaxies indicated that those galaxies were moving away from us. Okay? Now, to understand this, you just have to understand light coming from a source moving toward you looks different than light coming from a source that is moving away from you. Now you say, I've never noticed that. That's because you can't detect it with the human eye. But you have observed something similar. You have light and sound both travel in waves, and you have seen this with sound. Remember, think about a police car. If a police car has its siren on, and it's racing toward you, that siren sounds different to you than if that police car is moving away from you. You say, yeah, it sounds a lot better going away than right toward me. Yeah, I know, I get that. But it has a different frequency. That's because sound coming from a source that's moving toward you sounds different than sound coming from a source moving away from you. The same is true about light. Light coming from a source moving toward you looks different from light coming from a source moving away from you. And Edwin Hubble noticed this. He called it the red shift, because using technology, you can see that light coming from a source moving away from you tends toward the red end of the light spectrum. Technical way of saying, he found markers in the light coming from distant galaxies that showed that those galaxies were moving away. Therefore, the universe is expanding, scientifically proven. Now, here's what that means. If you were to rewind the clock far enough, and if the universe is eternal, you can go back as far as you want to, right? If you turn the clock back far enough, an expanding universe begins to constrict on itself if we put the clock in reverse. So the universe constricts and it becomes smaller and smaller until, if you go back far enough, the universe disappears into nothing. No space, no time, and no matter. In fact, scientists have a description for how the universe came from nothing into something. What do they call it? The Big Bang. The Big Bang. I love the way our founding pastor, Dr. Lee, used to talk about this. He said, I believe in the Big Bang. God said it and bang, it happened. That's pretty good. I'll buy that. But here's the point. Regardless of the details, science proves that the earth had a starting point because the universe is expanding. Let me share with you another way that we know the universe had a beginning. The universe is running out of usable energy. This is called entropy in science and physics. Okay, the second law of thermodynamics, and eyes just glazed over all over the room. The second law of, bear with me. Second law of thermodynamics, among other things, states that the amount of usable energy in our universe is getting less and less. In fact, scientists will tell you, at some point in the distant future, the usable energy in the universe is going to run out, and the universe will die. It's called entropy, second law of thermodynamics. This is my illustration of entropy. This is not sweet tea. Dozens of people have asked me. Okay, let's suppose that this glass container represents the closed system of our universe. The glass container is the universe. This liquid inside the container represents the usable energy in our universe. The second law of thermodynamics tells us that the amount of usable energy in the universe is getting less and less as that usable energy maintains our universe. It's kind of like when you drive somewhere in your car, as you use energy to get from point A to point B, the amount of gas in your tank gets less and less. Well, that's exactly what entropy tells us. The amount of usable energy in our universe is getting less and less and less. Now, how on earth does that prove the universe had a beginning? All right, we expended usable energy for what? 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, a couple of minutes? Let me ask you a question. What if I had started expending usable energy from our universe forever ago? If I had started using usable energy forever ago, the container would be empty by now. If according to the second law of thermodynamics, if the universe was eternal, if it never had a starting point, our usable energy would be used up by now. One of the greatest evidences that the universe had a beginning is that it is still operating. So we know the universe had a beginning for those two reasons as well as many others. So here's what this means. Here are the implications of this. The universe had a beginning, therefore the universe had a cause. Law of causality. Things do not just happen for no reason. If something had a beginning, it must have been caused, because all effects have causes. Now, I know what some may be thinking. Well, what about God? If you require the universe to have had a cause, then you also have to require that God had a cause. Who made God? Where did God come from? Okay, very important clarification here. The law of causality does not state that everything has a cause. It says that everything that comes to be has a cause. Every effect has a cause. This is why atheists, up until the 20th century, counted on the fact that the universe was eternal, because if it was eternal, it needed no cause. God, unlike the universe, God is eternal. And as an eternal being, God needs no cause. And by the way, in case you're interested, that's exactly what the Bible teaches. Okay. All right, so the universe had a beginning. Therefore, the universe had to have a cause that brought it into being. Here's something else I want you to see that points toward a creator, an intelligent designer. Not only did the universe have a beginning, but the universe has a complex design associated with it. Okay? Now, I'll just state the obvious. Designed things require an intelligent designer. All right, y'all stay with me. Caused things, when things happen, they can be caused by either an unintelligent cause or an intelligent cause. Okay, either can be true. For example, this is a picture of the Grand Canyon. There it is, okay. That's a picture of the Grand Canyon. Now, that is a beautiful natural formation out west. Now, it is a reasonable conclusion to say that natural forces like water erosion had something to do with the formation of that. Because you have observed how running water over ground can cut through the earth. Therefore, it is a reasonable conclusion to say that natural causes had something to do with the formation of the Grand Canyon. But this next picture is different. Okay, there is not a person in this room that believes for a moment that Mount Rushmore resulted from natural forces like water erosion. Yeah, water just ran over that rock and created that. No one's going to think that. Now, why is that? Because Mount Rushmore consists of a design. You know that someone with some level of intelligence designed and created Mount Rushmore. Things can either have an intelligent cause or an unintelligent cause. So, how do we know that the universe had an intelligent cause rather than merely an unintelligent cause? Couple of things. The universe was designed, the way we know that it was designed by an intelligent being is that, number one, and by the way, there are many reasons for this. I'm sharing what I can in the time that I have. The universe is fine-tuned to support human life on earth. This turns out to be remarkable. This is known in science as the anthropic principle. Scientists have discovered 122 constants that must have a precise value if human life on earth is to be sustained. If any one of those 122 variant constants are off a little bit, human life cannot be sustained. I'll give you some examples. The amount of oxygen in our atmosphere must be at a precise level. If it's too much, we can't exist. If it's too little, we can't exist. The transparency of our atmosphere must be just so precise, at a precise level, so that the proper amount of solar radiation reaches the earth. The moon's gravitational pull on the earth must be just so, otherwise there will be cataclysmic tide impacts in our oceans. 122 of these things. I want to share with you one of my favorites, because this really does boggle my mind. The earth can be thought of as a spaceship racing through space. If you get off the spaceship, you can't be sustained. You got to stay in the spaceship unless you're in a, spacewalking suit or whatever. Our earth is designed to be a spaceship to keep you safe as we race through the universe. Now, we are not just meandering through the universe. The earth is traveling through the universe at 67,000 miles per hour. Okay? We are moving through the universe. Now, here's what's remarkable about this. The earth is not racing through the universe in a straight line. It is not a drag race. We're not going 67,000 miles an hour in one direction. No. We're going 67,000 miles an hour in a circle around a ball of fire that could either burn us up if we got too close, or it could freeze us if we got too far. Now get this. The gravitational pull of the sun on the earth is so precise that it precisely offsets the tendency of the earth to veer out of its orbit just so it can be life-sustaining. Folks, that is an incredible design that is in place in our... I want to just read to you a quote from a Nobel laureate. Here's what he said. Astronomy leads us to a unique event, a universe which was created out of nothing and, watch this, and delicately balanced to provide exactly the conditions required to support life. Now watch this. In the absence of an absurdly improbable accident, the observations of modern science seem to suggest an underlying, one might say, supernatural plan. This anthropic principle, where things are so delicately and precisely balanced to sustain human life, is one evidence that the universe was designed by an intelligent designer. There's another one. I'll share this and then I'll close. The universe also contains complex information. There are messages encoded in our universe. There's nothing more beautiful than a cloudy sky at sunset or sunrise. It's just breathtaking how nature proclaims the handiwork of God. But that is just a gorgeous thing. But that's natural forming, okay? There's nothing's being communicated directly through what you see there. But this next slide is very different. If you were to look up and see this sky, how do I land? You're going to know that somebody up there is sending a message because there has been information conveyed. You know that whoever's responsible for that, number one, has some level of intelligence, and number two is probably not a very good pilot, but that's beside the point. The point of the matter is communication is evidence of a design. So let me share with you just one of many, many examples of how life is based on complex messages, complex information. The best example, perhaps, is DNA. Every cell has within it DNA. And that DNA bears a very specific and complex message that determines the characteristic of that cell. Now, let me see if I can illustrate this way. This right here is an antique. This is an encyclopedia. Okay. I don't know what year this was done, maybe 1960s or so, but this is one volume of a set of encyclopedias. This is volume 14. It goes from PA to PR. Okay, so let me tell you what, this is what we used to call Google. So let me share with you how this worked. You can open this encyclopedia and you can look up something, and there is a descriptive message about whatever topic you want to know about. So if I wanted to learn about the Patent Office in the United States, I could look up Patent Office, United States, and I could read a short message, a short paragraph of information about that topic. Okay, now, for purposes of illustration, let's say that we wanted to transcribe the message, the information encoded in DNA. And for purposes of illustration, just to make it simple, let's choose the simplest life form on earth, the amoeba. Now, why do I say it's the simplest life form? Because it only has one cell in it, okay? All right. If you were to take the DNA in a single cell organism called the amoeba, and you were to write out the message encoded on that DNA, it would not be an article in this volume. You would have to start on page 1, and you would begin writing the information, and it would fill up this volume. In fact, it would fill up 1,000 of these volumes. And it's not just a random message. It's a very specific, complex message that governs the characteristic of that cell. That is how complex and how detailed the information encoded in DNA is. Now, in case you're wondering, we talked about a single cell. Guess how many cells you have in your body? Approximately 37 trillion, give or take a few trillion, okay? 37 trillion cells. What I'm trying to communicate is the creation, the universe, our world, living things bear complex, specific messages that pass along information that is not random. If how do I land infers an intelligent source, then certainly 1,000 volumes of an encyclopedia that conveys information about the cell of an amoeba, certainly that requires an intelligent source. See, church, listen. Creation is a precisely designed and highly complex effect that demands a supernatural, intelligent cause. The argument between creation and evolution is not an argument between science and religion. It is an argument between good science and bad science. So it brings up the obvious question, doesn't it? It does to me. Why is it then that scientists would so willingly embrace and champion bad science? Why do scientists choose bad science over good science? We don't have to guess the answer to that question because they've told us why. Let me quote for you a Darwinist from Harvard University. Here's what he says. We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failure to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community for unsubstantiated just so stories. Now, why do they do that? Because we have a prior commitment to materialism. That materialism is absolute. Now watch this. For we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. May I paraphrase that for you? Scientists are eager to embrace bad science that excludes God before they are willing to embrace good science that proves Him. You see, this notion of where we came from has been made clear to us. Science shows it. Logic shows it. I'm often asked, Pastor Jeff, if God is real, and there is someone to whom I am personally accountable, and if my eternal destiny depends upon whether I accept Him or reject Him, if all of that's true, why does God not just show Himself? You know, throughout history, I'm not sure what else God could do to show Himself that would make a difference to you. Look around. Our universe declares Him. And if that weren't enough, God put on human flesh to come live in our world to show Himself, and not just to show Himself, but to die for us. God was willing to do all of that because of a problem that you and I had. It wasn't His problem, it was ours. We chose to turn our back on Him. And to make it right, God put on human flesh, came to this earth, died on a Roman cross, bearing your sins and mine. I wonder if this morning, if that great God might be knocking at someone's heart's door. I wonder if you hear that still small voice speaking to your soul. Today is the day that you say yes to me and accept the forgiveness that I freely offer. If that's you, I would like to lead you in a prayer. Let's bow our heads. Let's close our eyes. If you would like to cry out to the great creator of this universe, pray something like this. Dear God, I recognize I have sinned, and I'm desperate for your forgiveness. I believe Jesus was your Son, and He died on a cross to pay for my sin. And 3 days later, He rose from the dead. And right now, I place all my trust in what Jesus did for me to rescue me from my sin and to be adopted into your family. Please accept me as I now accept you into my life. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. If that was your prayer this morning, I would like to ask you to do something. In a few minutes, our service is going to dismiss. And as you leave, back at guest services, which is located out in our grand foyer, our volunteers have prepared for you a packet of information. It's information that explains what it means to be and to become a Christian. So please go by and receive it from us. It's free. We just want you to have it. All right, we've come to the time in our service that we call our response time. This is for you to respond however God would lead you to respond. Respond to whatever He's done in your heart, however He's spoken to your life. Our altars are going to be open for this purpose. If you would like to come kneel and pray, that's wonderful. I and a couple of other pastors will be down here at the front. If we can pray with you or for you about anything, we're happy to do so. The important thing is that we all respond as God leads. Let's stand. And as the music plays, you feel free to come right now.